You know what they say about family? That blood is thicker than water? Well, my family proved that sometimes blood can be poison. I'm Sarah, I'm 25 years old, and this is the story of how my parents promised to help me when I got pregnant at 16, then threw me out the day I gave birth. But here's the twist. 9 years later, they came back. Not to apologize, not to make amends. They came back to try to steal my daughter through the courts. Let me take you back to when this nightmare started. I was 16, living in a small town in Ohio called Millfield. You know the type, where everyone knows everyone else's business, and secrets don't stay secret for long. I was a junior at Millfield High, honor roll student, played volleyball, had plans for college. I thought I had my whole life mapped out. But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. His name was Tyler, and looking back, every red flag was there. But when you're 16 and think you're in love, you don't see red flags. You see passion. Tyler was 17, a senior, and he had this way of making me feel like I was the most important person in the world. Until I wasn't. See, Tyler had this thing about control. He needed to know where I was every second of every day. If I talked to a male teacher for too long, he'd accuse me of flirting. If I smiled at the cashier at Target, he'd say I was being inappropriate. He went through my phone regularly, checking my texts, my social media, even my search history. I remember one particular incident that should have been my wake-up call. I was at my godfather's hospital bedside. Uncle Mike, that's what I called him, had been in a car accident, and he was like a second father to me. He'd been unconscious for 3 days, and when he finally woke up, I rushed to the hospital straight from school. I was so overwhelmed with relief and emotion that I forgot to text Tyler immediately. When I finally remembered to check my phone 2 hours later, I had 47 missed calls and 139 text messages. The progression went from worried to angry to absolutely furious. The last message simply said, "We need to talk. Now." When Tyler picked me up from the hospital, he was eerily calm. That should have scared me more than his yelling ever did. He drove to our usual spot, this overlook by Miller's Creek where we used to go to be alone. But this time, it felt different. Dangerous. "You embarrassed me today," he said, not looking at me. "Everyone knows you're my girlfriend, and you're out there not answering my calls, probably flirting with every guy at that hospital." "Tyler, my godfather was unconscious. I was scared." "Don't interrupt me." His voice was ice cold. "You want to act single? Fine. But if you want to stay with me, you need to prove you're committed." That's when he said it. The thing that changed everything. "The only way I'll know you really love me is if you show me completely. Tonight." "And Sarah?" He paused, looking directly at me for the first time since we'd gotten in the car. "I'm not going to use anything. If you really love me, you'll trust me completely. I want to be clear about something, especially for any young women watching this. What happened next wasn't love. It wasn't passion. It was coercion, pure and simple. Tyler created a scenario where saying no felt impossible. He'd isolated me from my friends over the past year. He'd convinced me that no one else would ever love me the way he did. And in that moment, he made me believe that refusing him would mean losing the only person who truly understood me. I was 16. I was scared. And I said yes when everything inside me was screaming no. The whole thing lasted maybe 10 minutes, but those 10 minutes would change the trajectory of my entire life. Afterwards, Tyler was sweet again, apologetic, saying he loved me and just got scared of losing me. I believed him. Or at least, I wanted to believe him. 2 weeks later, Tyler's family announced they were moving to California. His dad had gotten a job transfer. Just like that, the boy who claimed he couldn't live without me was gone. When I tried calling him to tell him I was late, I discovered he'd blocked me on everything. When I tried reaching out through mutual friends, I learned he'd already enrolled in a new school and was telling people there that he'd never had a serious girlfriend back in Ohio. The 2 pink lines on that pregnancy test might as well have been a death sentence for the life I'd planned. I stared at that little plastic stick for 20 minutes, hoping it would somehow change. I took 3 more tests. Same result. I was 16, pregnant, and completely alone. But here's the thing that still breaks my heart when I think about it. I actually thought my parents would be my saving grace. We weren't the closest family, but they'd always provided for me, always showed up to my games, always talked about being proud of my grades. Surely they'd help me through this crisis. I remember rehearsing what I'd say to them. I'd practiced in the mirror probably 50 times. I'd start by telling them about Tyler leaving, how scared I was, how I needed their support. I thought they'd be disappointed, sure, but I thought they'd love me enough to help me figure it out. The conversation happened on a Tuesday night. Dad was reading the newspaper in his recliner, and Mom was folding laundry on the couch. I stood in the doorway of the living room for probably 5 minutes, gathering courage. Mom, Dad, I need to talk to you about something important. They both looked up. Mom set down the shirt she was folding. Dad folded his newspaper. I'm pregnant, I said, and then the words just tumbled out. About Tyler, about him leaving, about being scared and sorry and not knowing what to do. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Then Mom spoke first. Well, she said, her voice surprisingly calm. We'll help you take care of it. Those 7 words became the anchor I held on to for the next 7 months. We'll help you take care of it. I interpreted that as unconditional support. I thought it meant they'd help me raise the baby, help me finish school, help me figure out how to be a teen mom without derailing my entire future. Dad just nodded along with Mom's statement. We're family, he said. We stick together. Those next 7 months were simultaneously the hardest and most hopeful period of my life. The hardest because everything changed overnight. Word got around school within days. Small town, remember? Suddenly, I went from being Sarah the honor student to Sarah the pregnant teen. The whispers followed me everywhere. I heard she was trying to trap Tyler, but he was smart enough to run. My mom says her parents are probably mortified. She always seemed so good. I guess you never really know people. Some of my teachers were supportive, quietly helping me with modified assignments when morning sickness made it hard to keep up. But others seemed to view my pregnancy as a moral failing that they needed to distance themselves from. My volleyball coach suggested that I might want to focus on my health instead of the team. Translation: you're an embarrassment and we don't want you here. I ended up dropping out in my 2nd trimester, partially because the stares and comments were unbearable, but mostly because I was so sick I could barely function. I'd lost 15 pounds in my 1st trimester and was constantly exhausted. But through all of this, my parents seemed supportive. Mom came with me to doctor's appointments. Dad helped convert the spare room into a nursery. They bought a crib, a changing table, tiny clothes in soft yellow and green since we'd decided to keep the sex a surprise. We're going to spoil this baby, Mom would say, folding little onesies. Every child deserves to be loved and wanted. Those words gave me such hope. I started to believe that maybe this wasn't the end of my dreams, but just a detour. Maybe I could finish high school online, go to community college part-time, and still become a nurse like I'd always planned. My baby would have grandparents who loved them, a stable home, a support system. I couldn't have been more wrong. Lucy came into the world on March 15th, screaming and perfect and utterly mine. She weighed 6 pounds, 8 ounces, had a full head of dark hair, and when she opened her eyes for the first time, they were this incredible deep blue that reminded me of the creek where Tyler and I used to go. Labor was 14 hours of intensity I couldn't have prepared for. Mom held my hand through most of it, wiping my forehead with a cool cloth and telling me I was doing great. Dad paced the waiting room, apparently calling everyone he knew to announce that his granddaughter was coming. When Lucy finally arrived and they placed her on my chest, I felt a love so fierce and immediate that it actually took my breath away. This tiny person was mine to protect, mine to love, mine to guide through life. In that moment, despite everything that had led to her arrival, I knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly who was supposed to be here. She's beautiful, sweetheart, Mom said, tears in her eyes. Just perfect. Dad came in a few minutes later, and I'll never forget the way his face lit up when he saw Lucy. Well, Hello there, beautiful girl, he said softly. I'm your grandpa. For those first few hours, everything felt exactly like I'd hoped it would. My parents cooed over Lucy, took pictures, called relatives to share the news. I felt supported, loved, like we were really going to be okay. The hospital kept us for 2 days since I'd had a difficult labor. Those were blissful days of learning to breastfeed, marveling at Lucy's tiny fingers and toes, and imagining our future together. My parents visited multiple times each day, bringing flowers and balloons and talking about all the things they wanted to teach Lucy as she grew up. She's going to be so smart, Dad said, watching Lucy sleep in my arms. Look at that face. She's already thinking. The ride home from the hospital was quiet but comfortable. Mom drove while I sat in the back next to Lucy's car seat, unable to stop staring at her peaceful sleeping face. Dad had gone ahead to make sure everything was ready for our arrival. When we pulled into the driveway, I noticed Dad's truck was there, but something felt off. Usually when we came home from any trip, he'd come out to help carry things. This time, the house was eerily quiet. Mom carried the diaper bag while I carefully took Lucy out of her car seat. She'd started to fuss a little, probably hungry again. I was learning that newborns ate basically constantly. When we walked through the front door, I immediately saw them. 4 large black garbage bags lined up in the entryway. My heart started racing, but I told myself it must be something else. Maybe they'd done some spring cleaning while we were at the hospital. Maybe they'd packed up some old clothes to donate. But then I looked closer and saw a corner of my favorite sweater sticking out of one bag, and my biology textbook in another. Mom? I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What are these bags? That's when Dad emerged from the kitchen, his face hard in a way I'd never seen before. Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. We need to talk, Dad said. Lucy started crying then, as if she could sense the tension in the room. I bounced her gently, trying to soothe her while my world began to crumble around me. We've made a decision, Mom said, finally looking at me but speaking to a point somewhere over my shoulder. We're not going to enable this situation anymore. Enable what situation? I asked, though part of me already knew what was coming. This whole mess you've created, Dad said bluntly. Sarah, you made your choice when you decided to sleep around and get pregnant. We said we'd help you during the pregnancy, and we did. But we never said we'd raise your mistake for you. The words hit me like physical blows. Sleep around? Dad, I was with Tyler for almost a year, and you said... We said we'd help you take care of it, Mom interrupted. And we did. We helped you through the pregnancy, but that's over now. You're 17 years old with a baby and no father in sight. We're not ruining our lives because you couldn't keep your legs closed. I actually stumbled backwards at the cruelty of those words. This was my mother, the woman who'd held my hand through labor just 2 days ago, who'd cried when Lucy was born. But the nursery, I stammered, all the things you bought. You said you wanted to spoil her. Dad laughed, but there was no humor in it. Did you really think we meant that? Sarah, we told you what you needed to hear so you wouldn't do something stupid like get an abortion and have that on our consciences too. But we're not raising a bastard child. We have reputations in this community. Don't call her that, I said, my voice stronger now. Lucy was still crying, and I was trying so hard not to break down completely. She's your granddaughter. She's your problem, Mom said coldly. We're done cleaning up your messes. Those bags contain everything from your room. We've already changed the locks. You need to leave. Tonight. I felt like I was drowning while still standing on dry land. Leave? Where am I supposed to go? I just had a baby. That's not our problem anymore, Dad said. You made adult choices, now you get adult consequences. We're officially disowning you, Sarah. Don't come back here, don't call us, and don't expect any help from us. I stood there holding my crying daughter, staring at the 2 people who'd raised me, and felt more alone than I'd ever imagined possible. This wasn't just disappointment or anger. This was complete abandonment when I needed them most. Please, I whispered, and I hated how broken my voice sounded. I know you're disappointed in me, but she's innocent in all this. She's your grandchild. Please don't punish her for my mistakes. For just a moment, I saw something flicker in Mom's eyes. But then Dad put his hand on her shoulder and her face hardened again. "The decision is made," Mom said. "We've already talked to Pastor Williams about this. He agrees that tough love is sometimes necessary. We can't enable sin by making it comfortable." Pastor Williams. Of course they'd brought religion into it. Never mind that they hadn't been to church regularly in years. Now suddenly they were concerned about enabling sin. "You have 1 hour to call someone to pick you up," Dad said. "After that, we're calling the police and reporting you for trespassing." With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my contacts. Most of my high school friends had distanced themselves when I got pregnant. Tyler was obviously not an option. My godfather, Uncle Mike, was still recovering from his accident and living in a rehabilitation facility. That's when I remembered my mom's sister, Aunt Carol. She lived about an hour away in Columbus and had always been the rebellious one of the family. She'd gotten divorced 3 years ago and was living alone in a small house. We weren't super close, but she'd always been kind to me at family gatherings. With trembling fingers, I called her number. It rang 4 times before her voicemail picked up. I hung up and tried again. Same thing. Lucy was getting more and more upset, and I was running out of options. I called my old manager from the ice cream shop where I'd worked the summer before I got pregnant. No answer. I called my chemistry lab partner from junior year. Her mom answered and said she wasn't available, but I could hear her in the background asking who it was. Finally, on my 3rd try, Aunt Carol picked up. "Sarah? Is everything okay? It's kind of late, honey." I broke down completely then. Through sobbing tears, I explained everything. Lucy's birth, my parents' betrayal, the bags by the door, the ultimatum. There was a long pause after I finished talking. "Oh, sweetheart," Aunt Carol said softly. "Oh, honey, yes, of course you can come here. Pack up that baby and whatever you can carry, and I'll be there in an hour to pick you up." Aunt Carol was true to her word. Exactly 1 hour later, her beat-up Honda Civic pulled into our driveway. She didn't even turn off the engine before she was at our front door. She didn't say anything to my parents, just helped me load the garbage bags into her car and get Lucy's car seat properly installed. I'd never been so grateful for someone's silence. I couldn't have handled a confrontation right then. As we pulled out of the driveway, I turned back to look at the house where I'd grown up. Mom and Dad were watching from the living room window, but they didn't wave goodbye. They just watched us drive away like they were making sure we were really leaving. That was the last time I saw my childhood home. The drive to Columbus passed in a blur of tears and exhaustion. Lucy had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from crying, and Aunt Carol had classic rock playing softly on the radio. Every few minutes, she'd reach over and squeeze my hand. "We'll figure it out, kiddo," she kept saying. "Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together." Aunt Carol's house was a small 2-bedroom ranch in a working-class neighborhood of Columbus. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and warm. And most importantly, the door had been opened to us without conditions or judgment. "The spare room is yours for as long as you need it," she said, showing me to a small bedroom with a twin bed and a dresser. "It's not much, but it's safe and it's yours." I was so grateful I started crying again. After 48 hours of constant emotional upheaval, I felt like my tears were the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. "Thank you," I whispered. "I don't know how I'll ever pay you back." Aunt Carol sat down on the edge of the bed and looked at me seriously. "Sarah, I need to be honest with you about something. I'm not in a position to support you and Lucy long term. I'm working 2 jobs just to keep this place, and my divorce wiped out most of my savings. I can give you a safe place to stay while you figure out your next steps, but you're going to need to become self-sufficient pretty quickly." The reality of my situation hit me like a truck. I was 17 years old with a newborn baby, no high school diploma, no job, and no family support. I had maybe $200 in my savings account from my ice cream shop job. "How long do I have?" I asked. "Let's say 6 months," she said gently. "That should give you enough time to get your GED, find childcare, and get some kind of job training. I'll help however I can, but Sarah, you're going to have to grow up fast." Those first few weeks were a crash course in reality that no teenage parenting class could have prepared me for. Lucy was a good baby, But newborns don't care about your sleep schedule, your stress level, or your complete inexperience with everything from diaper changing to breastfeeding troubleshooting. I was averaging maybe 3 hours of broken sleep per night. My body was still recovering from childbirth. My hormones were all over the place, and I was trying to navigate the complicated emotions of grieving my relationship with my parents while simultaneously being grateful just to have a roof over our heads. Aunt Carol worked at a hotel downtown during the day and cleaned office buildings at night. She was rarely home, which meant I was on my own with Lucy most of the time. At first, this terrified me. What if something went wrong? What if Lucy got sick? What if I made some terrible mistake that hurt her? But slowly, out of necessity, I started to figure it out. I learned that Lucy's different cries meant different things. Hunger, tiredness, discomfort, or just needing to be held. I learned how to change a diaper efficiently while holding her steady with one hand. I learned that sometimes babies just cry, and that didn't mean I was a bad mother. When Lucy was 6 weeks old, I started looking for work. This proved harder than I'd anticipated. Most retail jobs required evening or weekend availability, which was impossible without childcare. Office jobs required a high school diploma, which I didn't have. And anywhere that paid well enough to cover both childcare and basic living expenses also required skills or experience I didn't possess. Finally, I found an overnight position at a 24-hour laundromat called Suds and Duds on the east side of Columbus. The manager, a woman named Rita, who looked like she'd seen every hard luck story in the book, hired me on the spot. "You seem desperate enough to actually show up," she said bluntly. "The last 3 people I hired lasted less than a week each. The work is boring, the customers are mostly drunk college kids or insomniacs, and it pays minimum wage. You interested?" I was definitely interested. The hours were 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., which meant I could work while Lucy slept. Rita said I could bring her with me as long as she didn't disturb customers, which were few and far between during the overnight shift anyway. Working overnight at the laundromat while caring for a newborn was exhausting in ways I couldn't have imagined. My typical night involved getting Lucy fed and settled by 10:30 p.m., packing up everything we'd need for 8 hours, diapers, formula, changes of clothes, blankets, and walking the 6 blocks to Suds and Duds. The laundromat was actually not a bad place to spend the night. It was warm, well lit, and there was a small office in the back with a couch where I could nurse Lucy or let her sleep. Most customers between midnight and 6 a.m. were pretty self-sufficient. They just wanted to do their laundry without conversation. But there were challenges. Some nights, Lucy would have growth spurts and want to eat every hour. Some nights, she'd be colicky and cry inconsolably. And some nights, customers would complain about the baby being there, even though she was usually quieter than the washing machines. I'll never forget this one particular customer, a woman probably in her 50s who came in around 2 a.m. on a Tuesday night. Lucy had been fussing, and I was walking around the laundromat trying to soothe her while keeping an eye on everyone's laundry. "Excuse me," the woman said sharply. "I didn't come here to listen to a baby cry. Can't you make it stop?" I was so tired and emotionally drained that her tone immediately made me defensive. "I'm sorry. She's just having a difficult night. She'll settle down soon." "This is ridiculous," the woman continued. "What kind of place allows babies in a business? I'm going to complain to management." And you know what I said? "Go ahead. Management is Rita, and she'll be here tomorrow afternoon if you want to discuss the baby policy with her. But right now, I'm doing the best I can to take care of my daughter and do my job. So unless you want to hold her while I help you with your laundry, I'd appreciate a little patience." The woman huffed and muttered under her breath, but she didn't say anything else. And surprisingly, about 30 minutes later, she came over with a little smile. "You know," she said, "you remind me of myself when my kids were little. It's hard doing it on your own. Here." She handed me a $20 bill. "Get yourself a decent cup of coffee on your way home." That small act of kindness nearly made me break down crying right there in the laundromat. During the quieter hours at work, usually between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., I studied for my GED. Aunt Carol had bought me a test prep book from the used bookstore, and I'd gotten library books to fill in gaps in my knowledge. Studying with a baby was its own special challenge. I'd spread my books out on the folding counter and try to work through math problems or read passages for the English section. Every few minutes, I'd check on Lucy in her carrier or stop to feed her. It took me weeks to get through material that probably should have taken days, but slowly I was making progress. The math was hardest for me. I'd been in calculus when I dropped out, but somehow balancing chemical equations felt easier than figuring out percentages when I was running on 3 hours of sleep. The science section was actually enjoyable. I'd always loved biology, and reading about cellular respiration and genetics reminded me of the dreams I'd had about becoming a nurse. Dreams that felt very far away, but maybe not impossible. I took my GED test when Lucy was 4 months old. Aunt Carol had agreed to watch her for the 4 hours the test would take, which was the longest I'd been away from Lucy since she was born. I was incredibly nervous, not just about the test itself, but about leaving Lucy. What if she wouldn't take a bottle from Aunt Carol? What if she had a diaper blowout? What if she needed me and I wasn't there? "Sarah," Aunt Carol said gently as I was giving her detailed instructions for the 5th time. "I've raised 3 kids. Lucy will be fine for 4 hours. You've prepared for this test for months. Go show them what you're capable of." The test itself was challenging but manageable. The math section took me longer than I'd hoped, and I definitely guessed on a few questions. But the reading comprehension felt easy, and I knew I'd done well on the science and social studies portions. When I walked out of that testing center, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: pride in myself. Regardless of how I'd scored, I'd accomplished something significant. I'd studied for and taken my high school equivalency exam while working overnight shifts and caring for an infant. That was worth celebrating. The results came in the mail 2 weeks later. I passed with scores high enough to qualify for college admission. When I opened that envelope and saw the numbers, I actually screamed with joy, startling Lucy awake from her nap. "We did it, baby girl," I said, picking her up and dancing around Aunt Carol's tiny living room. Mama graduated. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to imagine a real future. Maybe I could take some community college classes part-time. Maybe I could still become a nurse. Maybe Lucy and I could build a good life together. That night, I called my parents' house. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe that they'd be proud of my accomplishment. Maybe that this would be the thing that brought us back together. Dad answered the phone. "Hi, Dad. It's Sarah. I just wanted to let you know that I passed my GED test. I scored high enough to get into college, and Sarah, I thought we were clear about this. You're not part of this family anymore. Please don't call here again." The line went dead. I sat in Aunt Carol's kitchen, holding the phone and staring at my GED certificate, feeling the complex mix of pride and heartbreak that I was getting used to. My accomplishment was real and valuable, regardless of my parents' refusal to acknowledge it. With my GED completed, I started researching my options for continuing education. Columbus State Community College had a nursing program that I could potentially start the following fall, but I'd need to complete prerequisite courses first. The bigger challenge was logistics. How could I take classes while working and caring for Lucy? I'd saved up about $1,500 from my laundromat job, which sounds like nothing, but felt like a fortune when you're used to living paycheck to paycheck. Aunt Carol had been incredibly generous about not charging me rent, but I knew I couldn't depend on her indefinitely. That's when I found out about a program through the county for young mothers. It provided subsidized childcare and financial aid for women under 21 who were pursuing education or job training. I qualified for everything: childcare assistance, food stamps, Medicaid for Lucy and me, and even some help with housing costs. I remember feeling so conflicted about accepting government assistance. My parents had always talked about welfare recipients with such disdain, implying that people who needed help were somehow lazy or manipulating the system. But here I was, working 40 hours a week and still struggling to afford basic necessities for my child. The social worker who helped me apply for benefits was a woman named Jennifer, who was probably only a few years older than me. When I expressed my embarrassment about needing help, she looked at me seriously. "Sarah, you're 17 years old, working full-time, raising a baby on your own, and planning to go to college. This isn't charity. This is an investment in your future and Lucy's future. The system exists to help people in exactly your situation get back on their feet." Her words helped me reframe how I thought about accepting help. This wasn't failing. This was using available resources to build a better life. When Lucy turned 1, I enrolled in my first college classes at Columbus State. I started with just 2 courses, college algebra and introduction to psychology, while continuing to work at the laundromat 3 nights a week. Childcare was provided through the county program at a facility specifically designed for children of student parents. Lucy loved it there immediately. She was walking by then and loved having other kids to play with. For the first time since she was born, I was around people my own age who were working towards similar goals. My math professor, Dr. Rodriguez, was particularly encouraging. During office hours one day, she asked about my long-term plans. "I want to be a nurse," I told her. "Specifically, I'd love to work in pediatrics. I think my experience as a young mother gives me a different perspective on what families need." "The nursing program here is excellent," she said, "but it's competitive to get in, and once you're accepted, it's essentially a full-time commitment. Have you thought about how you'll manage that with Lucy?" I had thought about it. Constantly. The nursing program required clinical rotations at various times, including nights, weekends, and holidays. I'd need more reliable childcare than what was currently available to me, and I'd probably need to quit my laundromat job. "I'll figure it out," I said. "I have to. This is our path to a better life." Despite the logistical challenges, I thrived academically. After months of studying in a laundromat with a baby, sitting in an actual classroom felt like luxury. I could focus completely on the material for 90-minute stretches. I could participate in discussions with other students. I could ask questions without worrying about whether Lucy needed a diaper change. My grades were excellent, A's in both classes that first semester. More importantly, I remembered why I'd loved learning. The psychology class was particularly fascinating. Understanding child development from an academic perspective helped me feel more confident as a mother, and learning about trauma and resilience gave me a framework for understanding my own experiences. I also made my first real friend since high school, a woman named Jessica who was 19 and also a single mother. Her daughter Maya was just a few months younger than Lucy, and we quickly bonded over the unique challenges of being student parents. "Some days I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water," Jessica confided one day as we watched our daughters play together at the campus childcare center. "But then I remember that we're doing something incredible. We're changing our family's entire trajectories." After 2 semesters of prerequisites, I applied for the nursing program. The application process was intense. Essays, interviews, transcripts, and a detailed explanation of how I planned to manage the program's demands while caring for a child. The interview was particularly challenging. 3 nursing faculty members asked me detailed questions about my motivation, my understanding of the profession, and my ability to handle stress. Then came the question I'd been dreading. "Sarah, the nursing program requires significant time commitments, including clinical rotations that may conflict with your parental responsibilities. How do we know you won't drop out when those challenges become overwhelming?" I took a deep breath before answering. "With respect, you don't know that I won't face challenges, but you also don't know that I will drop out. What you do know is that I've successfully completed my prerequisites while working nights and caring for a toddler. You know that my grades demonstrate both ability and commitment. And you know that becoming a nurse isn't just a career goal for me. It's my family's pathway out of poverty." I paused, then continued. "I understand that my situation is complicated, but I'd argue that my experiences as a young single mother have given me skills that will make me a better nurse. I understand what it's like to advocate for your child in a healthcare system that sometimes doesn't listen. I know what it feels like to be judged for your circumstances rather than evaluated on your character. I think those perspectives would be valuable in a profession that's supposed to be about caring for people during their most vulnerable moments." 3 weeks later, I received my acceptance letter. I was so excited that I picked Lucy up and spun her around our tiny apartment until we were both dizzy and giggling. "Mama's going to be a nurse," I told her, even though at 18 months she had no idea what that meant. "We did it, baby girl." But excitement quickly gave way to anxiety about the practical realities. The nursing program was a full-time commitment. I'd need to quit my laundromat job, which meant living entirely on student loans and whatever assistance I could get. I'd need full-time childcare, including coverage for clinical rotations that could start as early as 6 a.m. or end as late as midnight. Aunt Carol and I had a serious conversation about my plans. She'd been supportive of my part-time college attendance, but nursing school would be different. "I think it's wonderful that you got accepted," she said. "But Sarah, I need to be honest. I can't provide childcare for the kind of schedule you're talking about. My own work schedule is too unpredictable." She was absolutely right, and I didn't blame her. She'd already done more for us than she was obligated to do. But it meant I needed to find other solutions. That's when Jessica and I came up with what we called our mutual aid network. We found 3 other single mothers in similar situations and worked out a childcare sharing arrangement. When one of us had clinical rotations, the others would cover childcare. When someone had a major exam, the group would watch all the kids so she could study uninterrupted. It wasn't perfect. There were scheduling conflicts, miscommunications, and times when someone couldn't follow through on their commitments. But it worked well enough to make nursing school possible. We also shared other resources: textbooks, study guides, even groceries when someone was particularly short on cash. We celebrated each other's successes and provided emotional support during the inevitable breakdowns that came with trying to balance so much. Nursing school was the hardest thing I'd ever attempted. The coursework was challenging but manageable. The real difficulty was the clinical rotations, 12-hour shifts in hospitals where I needed to demonstrate not just knowledge, but competence and skills that could literally be life or death. My first clinical rotation was in medical surgical nursing at a large hospital downtown. I was terrified. These were real patients with real health conditions, and I was responsible for their care under the supervision of clinical instructors who had 0 patience for mistakes. I remember my first day vividly. I was assigned to care for an elderly man recovering from hip replacement surgery. My tasks included monitoring his vital signs, helping him with mobility exercises, and administering medications. Simple enough in theory, but when you're actually standing next to someone's hospital bed, responsible for their well-being, the weight of that responsibility is overwhelming. The patient, Mr. Henderson, was incredibly kind. When I nervously introduced myself as a nursing student, he smiled and said, "Well, we all have to learn somewhere. I trust you'll take good care of me." His faith in me was both comforting and terrifying. The hardest part wasn't the academic or clinical work itself. It was trying to be fully present for everything simultaneously. During clinical rotations, I needed to focus completely on patient care and learning. But in the back of my mind, I was always worried about Lucy. Was she okay at childcare? Was she missing me? Was I being a bad mother by pursuing this dream? One particularly difficult week, Lucy got sick with a stomach bug right before my final exam in pharmacology. She was throwing up every few hours and running a fever, which meant she couldn't go to childcare. I had no one to watch her, and I couldn't miss this exam without failing the course. I ended up bringing her with me to campus and setting up a makeshift sickbed in my car between study sessions. Every hour, I'd go check on her, give her small sips of water, and take her temperature. It wasn't ideal for either of us, but we made it work. That's when I really understood what people meant when they talked about the sacrifices of single parenthood. It wasn't just about having less money or free time. It was about making impossible choices between competing responsibilities, both of which felt absolutely essential. But you know what? I passed that pharmacology exam, and Lucy recovered completely. And I realized that we were stronger than I'd given us credit for. Fast forward 2.5 years. I graduated from the nursing program with honors. Lucy was 4 years old, chatty and brilliant, and the center of my universe. I'd been offered a position in the pediatric unit at Children's Hospital of Columbus, which felt like a dream come true. We'd moved into our own apartment, a 1-bedroom place that was small but clean and entirely ours. Lucy had her own bed in the bedroom while I slept on a pull-out couch in the living room, but she loved having her own space to decorate with drawings and stuffed animals. Life was good. Not easy, but good. I was making enough money to cover our basic expenses without assistance. Lucy was thriving in pre-K. I felt for the first time since her birth like we'd really made it. That's when they showed up. I was picking Lucy up from her after-school program on a Tuesday in September when I saw them. My parents standing next to a silver BMW in the parking lot of Lucy's school, watching me with expressions I couldn't quite read. My heart immediately started pounding. In the 4 years since they'd kicked me out, I'd had no contact with them at all. I'd occasionally driven past our old house, but they'd moved about a year after disowning me. I'd heard through Aunt Carol that they'd relocated to an affluent suburb north of Columbus, where my dad had taken a job with a financial planning firm. They looked successful. Expensive clothes, perfect hair, that polished appearance that comes with financial security. They looked like the kind of people who belonged in a suburban parking lot picking up their grandchild from a private school. "Mama, who are those people?" Lucy asked, tugging on my hand. "They're staring at us." "I don't know, sweetheart," I lied, steering her quickly toward our car. "Let's go home." But I couldn't shake the image of their faces. My mother had been looking at Lucy with an expression of longing that made me uncomfortable. My father had been watching me with what looked like calculation. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing them everywhere. At the grocery store where I shopped with Lucy, at the park where we went on Saturday mornings. Always at a distance, always watching, never approaching directly. Lucy started to notice too. "Mama, those same people are here again," she'd say, pointing across the playground. "Do they have kids here too?" I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. Columbus was a big city, but maybe their presence was just coincidental. Maybe they shopped at the same stores, visited the same parks. Maybe I was reading sinister intentions into innocent coincidences. But then the gifts started appearing. First, it was a beautiful dollhouse that appeared in Lucy's classroom at school. Her teacher mentioned that generous grandparents had donated it for all the children to share. When I saw it, my blood ran cold. It was an exact replica of the house I'd grown up in, the house they'd thrown me out of 4 years earlier. Then, expensive art supplies showed up in the school's art room. A new playground structure was installed, funded by anonymous donors. The entire pre-K class got invited on a field trip to the zoo, all expenses paid by community supporters. Other parents started looking at me differently. I could hear whispers. "Her parents must be loaded." I heard her grandparents are funding all sorts of improvements to the school. It's so sweet how involved they are. Lucy loved the new toys and activities, but she also started asking questions I didn't know how to answer. "Mama, everyone says I have grandparents who buy things for the school. Where are they? Can I meet them?" How do you explain to a 4-year-old that her grandparents threw you both out when she was newborn? How do you tell her that these generous benefactors who care so much about her education refuse to even acknowledge her existence for the first 4 years of her life? The direct confrontation finally came on a Friday afternoon in October. I was walking Lucy to the car after school when my mother approached us. "Sarah," she said softly, "could we talk?" Lucy immediately hid behind my legs, sensing my tension. I instinctively put my hands on her shoulders, protective. "We have nothing to talk about," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Please," Mom said, and I was shocked to see tears in her eyes. "We've made mistakes. We want to make things right." "Make things right?" I repeated, incredulous. "You threw me out when I was 17 with a newborn baby. You told me I was disowned. You hung up on me when I called to tell you I'd passed my GED. We were wrong," she said. "We were angry and hurt, and we made terrible decisions. But we're older now. We've had time to think about what we lost." Dad approached then, having apparently been waiting nearby. He looked at Lucy with an expression of wonder. "She's beautiful, Sarah. She looks just like you did at that age." "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't you dare act like you care about her now." 3 weeks later, a process server showed up at my apartment with legal documents. My parents were petitioning for grandparent visitation rights, claiming that I was denying them access to their granddaughter and that it was in Lucy's best interest to have a relationship with them. The legal language was complex, but the basic argument was clear. They claimed I was an unfit mother who was depriving Lucy of the benefits of having grandparents in her life. They cited my history as a teenage mother, my reliance on government assistance during college, my unstable housing situation, and my demanding work schedule as evidence that Lucy would be better off in their care. They wanted supervised visitation initially, with the goal of obtaining partial custody. I stared at those papers in complete disbelief. These people who'd abandoned us when we needed them most, who'd refused to even acknowledge Lucy's existence, now wanted to take her away from me because I'd built a successful life without them. I couldn't afford a lawyer, but I qualified for legal aid services through the county. The attorney assigned to my case was a young woman named Maria Santos who specialized in family law. "This is an unusual case," she said after reviewing the documents. "Grandparent rights in Ohio are limited, especially when the grandparents have had no prior relationship with the child. The fact that they voluntarily cut off contact for 4 years actually works in your favor." "But they're claiming I'm unfit," I said. "What if the judge believes them?" "Their claims are weak," Maria assured me. "You're a licensed nurse with stable employment. You've provided consistent care for Lucy her entire life. You've never been investigated by child services. The fact that you were young when you had her and received assistance while in school actually demonstrates responsibility, not unfitness." But she also warned me about what we were up against. "Your parents clearly have money for expensive lawyers. They may try to drag this out, hoping to exhaust your resources. And judges sometimes have unconscious biases about young single mothers, especially those who had children as teenagers. So what do? We prepare thoroughly, document everything, and trust that the court will see what's really happening here. An attempt by estranged grandparents to use the legal system to gain access to a child they abandoned. Within a week of receiving the legal papers, my life began falling apart in ways that felt too coordinated to be coincidental. First, I got called in for a meeting with my supervisor at the hospital. "Sarah, we've received a complaint about you," Dr. Peterson said, his face serious. "Someone reported that you've been bringing your daughter to work and leaving her unattended in the break room." "That's completely untrue," I said immediately. "I have never brought Lucy to the hospital except for the employee family picnic in August." "The complaint was very specific," he continued. "It alleged that on multiple occasions you've been found with a child during your shifts." I realized with growing horror what was happening. "Dr. Peterson, I worked at a 24-hour laundromat when Lucy was a baby, and I did bring her there because my manager allowed it. But I have never brought her to the hospital. Ever. This is a false accusation." The investigation took 3 weeks to complete. Security footage ultimately proved my innocence, but during those 3 weeks, I was placed on administrative leave without pay. 3 weeks without income when I was already struggling to pay for a lawyer. Then Child Protective Services showed up at my apartment for a routine welfare check. The caseworker, a stern woman named Ms. Thompson, said they'd received an anonymous report about a child living in substandard conditions. "I need to inspect your home and interview you and your daughter separately," she said, pulling out a clipboard. My apartment was small but clean. Lucy's bed was made, her toys were organized, and our kitchen was well stocked with healthy food. Ms. Thompson walked through each room, taking notes and photos. "Your daughter sleeps in the only bedroom while you sleep on the couch?" she asked. "Yes, I want her to have her own space." "And you work night shifts?" "No, I work day shifts at the hospital. 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., 3 days a week." "Who watches your daughter during those times?" I explained our childcare arrangement with Jessica and the other mothers from our nursing school support group. Ms. Thompson wrote everything down with an expression that suggested she found our informal network inadequate. Next came a court-ordered psychological evaluation for both Lucy and me. The psychologist, Dr. Williams, was professional but thorough. She interviewed me for 2 hours, asking about my childhood, my relationship with Lucy's father, my parenting philosophy, and my mental health. "Have you ever been treated for depression or anxiety?" she asked. "I saw a counselor through the county health services during my first year of college," I admitted. The transition to being a single parent was difficult, and I needed some support developing coping strategies. "And currently?" "Currently, I'm dealing with the stress of this custody case, but otherwise I feel good about my life and my parenting." Lucy's evaluation was harder to watch. Dr. Williams asked her to draw pictures of our family and our home, to describe her daily routine, and to talk about who she felt safe with. "My mama takes good care of me," Lucy said confidently. "She makes me breakfast and walks me to school and reads me stories at bedtime. When I get scared at night, she lets me come sleep with her on the couch." Do you know your grandparents? Dr. Williams asked. No, Lucy said. Mama says they live far away and don't visit, but some kids at school say I have grandparents who buy things for our class. I don't know if that's true. As the court date approached, the harassment escalated. Someone called immigration services to report that Jessica, my childcare partner, was undocumented. She wasn't, but the investigation disrupted our arrangement and left me scrambling for backup care. Someone also reported to the IRS that I was receiving unreported income from private patients. Again, completely false, but it triggered an audit that consumed hours of my time gathering documentation to prove my innocence. The pattern was clear. My parents or their lawyers were systematically trying to destabilize my life to make their case that I was an unfit guardian. Every false report, every investigation, every hour I spent defending myself against baseless accusations was designed to exhaust my resources and create evidence of instability. The custody hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in November. I took the day off work, arranged for Jessica to watch Lucy. She'd been cleared of all immigration allegations, and met Maria at the courthouse. Remember, she told me, stay calm no matter what they say. Answer questions directly and honestly, and trust that the truth will speak for itself. My parents arrived with 3 lawyers in expensive suits. They looked confident, polished, like people accustomed to getting their way. When my mother saw me across the courtroom, she gave me a small smile that I interpreted as either sympathetic or smug. The judge was a middle-aged woman named Judge Patricia Hansen. She'd been on the family court bench for 15 years and had a reputation for being thorough and fair, but also no nonsense. My parents' lawyer, Mr. Morrison, painted a picture of me as a struggling young woman who'd made poor choices and was now denying Lucy the benefits of having financially stable, loving grandparents in her life. Your Honor, my clients deeply regret the mistakes they made when their daughter was a teenager, he said smoothly. They were young themselves, overwhelmed by the situation, and they reacted poorly. But they've spent the last 4 years reflecting on their actions and working to become better people. They simply want the opportunity to have a relationship with their granddaughter and to provide her with opportunities that her mother's limited resources cannot offer. When it was my turn to testify, I told the complete truth. About Tyler's coercion, about my parents' false promises, about being thrown out with a newborn baby, about working overnight shifts while studying for my GED, about nursing school, about building a stable life for Lucy and myself. Did your parents offer any support during your pregnancy? Maria asked. They said they would help me take care of it, which I understood to mean raising the baby together. They helped prepare a nursery and attended doctor's appointments. But the day I came home from the hospital, they told me they'd only said those things to prevent me from terminating the pregnancy. And have they provided any support since Lucy's birth? None. No financial support, no emotional support, no contact at all until they started showing up at her school a few months ago. Morrison's cross-examination was brutal. He questioned every decision I'd ever made, implied that I was bitter and vindictive, and suggested that I was harming Lucy by depriving her of grandparents who could provide her with advantages I couldn't. Ms. Martinez, isn't it true that you work long shifts and rely on an informal network of friends for childcare? I work 3 12-hour shifts per week, which is standard for hospital nursing. Lucy is cared for by responsible adults who are also mothers and nursing students or graduates. But these aren't licensed childcare facilities? No, it's a cooperative arrangement among friends who support each other's families. And you've moved multiple times since Lucy's birth? I moved from my aunt's house to my own apartment when I could afford it. Lucy and I have lived in the same apartment for 2 years now. Would you agree that your parents could provide Lucy with educational opportunities, travel experiences, and financial security that you cannot? I can provide Lucy with love, consistency, and security. I'm working to build a stable future for us, and Lucy is thriving. Morrison's questions felt designed to make me appear defensive and unstable, but I tried to stay calm and answer honestly. Then he played his final card. Your Honor, we have security footage from Ms. Martinez's apartment building showing her carrying the child up the stairs at 2 a.m. last Tuesday. This demonstrates a pattern of exposing the child to inappropriate circumstances. The footage showed me carrying a sleeping Lucy home from an emergency shift I'd had to cover when a colleague called in sick. I'd had to bring Lucy with me to the hospital, and she'd fallen asleep in the family waiting area while I finished my documentation. That was one emergency situation, I explained. A coworker had a family crisis, and I agreed to cover her shift. Lucy slept safely in the family area while I completed essential patient care tasks. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, something unexpected happened. Lucy, who was supposed to be waiting in the hallway with Jessica, walked into the courtroom. "I need to talk to the judge," she announced, her small voice carrying clearly through the room. Judge Hansen looked surprised, but not unkind. "Young lady, this isn't really the place for children. But they're talking about me and nobody asked me what I want," Lucy said, moving to stand in front of the judge's bench. "That's not fair." Morrison started to object, but Judge Hansen held up her hand. "Let her speak." Lucy took a shaky breath, and I could see her gathering her courage. "Those people," she pointed at my parents. "They say they're my grandparents. But grandparents are supposed to love you from when you're born, right? They didn't want me when I was a baby. Mama told me they made her leave when I was born because they didn't want us." "Lucy," my mother started to say, half rising from her seat. "I'm not done," Lucy said firmly. "You don't get to talk to me now. You never talked to me before." Judge Hansen was listening intently, making notes. "They say they want to take care of me because Mama can't," Lucy continued. "But Mama takes care of me every day. She makes my lunch and helps me with homework and takes me to the doctor and reads me stories. When I have nightmares, she holds me until I'm not scared anymore." Lucy turned to look at my parents directly. "You don't even know me. You don't know that I like pancakes better than waffles, or that I'm scared of big dogs, or that my favorite book is about a mouse who saves a princess. You just want to win against Mama because you're still mad that she had me." Judge Hansen called for a brief recess after Lucy's testimony. When court reconvened, she had clearly made her decision. "I've reviewed all the evidence in this case," she began, "and I find the petitioner's request for visitation rights to be without merit." Relief flooded through me, but Judge Hansen wasn't finished. "More concerning to this court is the pattern of harassment that appears to have taken place during these proceedings. Anonymous reports to CPS, Immigration Services, the IRS, and the petitioner's employer, all filed within weeks of this case being initiated." She looked directly at my parents and their legal team. "While I cannot prove who filed these reports, I find the timing highly suspicious. The use of government agencies to harass and intimidate opposing parties is a serious abuse of the legal system." Morrison tried to interrupt, but Judge Hansen continued. "The child in question has been in the sole care of her mother for her entire life. The mother has demonstrated consistency, responsibility, and love. The child is clearly thriving and has expressed a clear preference to remain with her mother. Furthermore, the petitioners voluntarily severed their relationship with both the mother and child for 4 years. Their sudden interest in the child's welfare coincides with their discovery that she is no longer an infant requiring intensive care, but is now a school-age child who could potentially be an enjoyable presence in their lives. The petition for grandparent visitation is denied," Judge Hansen concluded. "The court finds no evidence that such visitation would be in the child's best interest, and substantial evidence that the petitioners have acted in bad faith throughout these proceedings." She turned to Morrison. "I'm also ordering an investigation into the pattern of false reports filed during this case. If evidence is found linking these reports to your clients or your firm, I will be recommending sanctions." The gavel came down with finality. I sat in stunned silence for a moment before Maria squeezed my arm. "It's over," she whispered. "You won." Lucy ran to me then, throwing her arms around my waist. "Did we win, Mama? Do we get to stay together?" "We get to stay together," I confirmed, holding her tight. Outside the courthouse, my mother approached us one final time while Dad and the lawyers waited by their car. "Sarah," she said quietly, "I know you probably won't believe this, but we really do regret what happened when you were younger." I looked at her for a long moment. "You know what, Mom? I actually do believe that you regret it, but not because you realized it was wrong to abandon your pregnant daughter. You regret it because you missed out on knowing Lucy, And now that she's past the difficult baby stage, you thought you could just walk back into our lives and claim your relationship with her. That's not— Yes, it is, I interrupted. You spent 4 years proving that you don't care about us. Then you spent the last 6 months trying to destroy my life through the courts. You had your chance to be grandparents, and you chose to throw it away when we needed you most. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Please don't punish Lucy for our mistakes. She deserves to know her family. Lucy's family is made up of people who've been there for her since day one, I said firmly. Aunt Carol, who took us in when you threw us out. Jessica and Maria and the other women who've helped us survive and thrive. Rita from the laundromat, who let me bring a newborn to work. Dr. Rodriguez, who believed in my potential when I was just a teenage mother trying to pass college algebra. I picked Lucy up, even though she was getting heavy for that. Blood doesn't make you family. Love and commitment make you family. And Lucy has plenty of both. That night, Lucy and I celebrated with pizza from the good place. The one that cost too much but had the garlic knots she loved. Our small apartment felt like a fortress we'd successfully defended. Mama, Lucy said as I tucked her into bed, are you sad that they're not going to be my grandparents? No, sweetheart. I'm proud that you stood up for yourself and for us. That took real courage. Jessica says courage runs in families, Lucy said sleepily. She says I get mine from you. And I get mine from you, I told her, kissing her forehead. We make each other brave. The next few months brought a return to normalcy. The false investigations were all closed with no findings of wrongdoing. My parents moved out of state. I heard through Aunt Carol that Dad had taken a job in Arizona. We never heard from them again. Today, Lucy is 9 years old. She's in 4th grade, plays soccer, and wants to be either a veterinarian or a marine biologist depending on what day you ask her. She's never asked about her grandparents again. I'm 26 now, working as a pediatric nurse and taking online courses toward my bachelor's degree. We live in a small house with a yard where Lucy can play. It's not fancy, but it's ours. Sometimes people ask if I regret having Lucy so young, if I feel like I missed out on my youth or my freedom. The truth is, Lucy didn't ruin my life. She saved it. She gave me purpose when I felt completely lost. She taught me that I was stronger than I ever imagined. She showed me what unconditional love really looks like. My parents thought they were punishing me by cutting me off, but they actually gave me the greatest gift: the chance to build a life based on love instead of conditions. Lucy and I don't need their money or their approval. We have something much more valuable. We have each other, and we have the knowledge that we can survive anything as long as we stick together. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when life gets hard. It's about who celebrates your victories and holds you through your failures. By that definition, Lucy and I have the richest family in the world. And you know what? I wouldn't change a single thing. If you're watching this and you're in a similar situation, whether you're a young parent feeling abandoned, someone dealing with toxic family members, or just trying to build a better life against the odds, please know that you're stronger than you think. The people who truly belong in your life will show up when it matters. And sometimes the family you choose is more valuable than the family you're born into. Thank you for listening to our story. Lucy and I are living proof that love really can conquer all.